Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 82.
Congratulations, you showed up. Give yourself a high five in celebration of your success. Welcome to the Cashflow Diary, where new and experienced investors come to take confident action towards their goals. Your host is a family man, a real estate entrepreneur, investor, coach, and instructor. As a master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's Cashflow 101 game, he's inspired many to begin their journey into creating cash flow for themselves and their family. And now, here he is to offer you the tools required to earn the income desired. Your cash flow coach, Jay Massey.
All right, and welcome to yet another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. Glad that you are here. I'm Jay, your host, looking forward to helping you increase your cash flow one more time with additional information, more entrepreneurs, because you know what? There's so many of us out there, and I want to make sure that you know them all. Good luck with that, right? I'll do my best to get in front of the biggest, the best, the brightest, and bring you entrepreneurs from all corners of the globe as much as I possibly can, because I want you to understand something. Real estate is not the only place where cash flow can be created, and that's exactly what we do here. Is we create cash flow, in many different ways. Some of you're probably better at being stock people than you are real estate people. But if you're here for real estate, you understand that this is a good place for it. Some of you want to build your cash flow with businesses, and we will bring you entrepreneurs in that vein as well. But today, what I really love is that we have a special type of entrepreneur. I in my opinion, I think the people who go out there and are willing to lay down their lives for the very freedoms that we entrepreneurs get to exercise on a daily basis, those are special people to me. And today's guest has definitely served in our military, and I want to bring him out here just in a second. But for those of you joining us for the first time, here's what I want you to do. If you're saying to yourself, okay, I'd like to get my own cash flow started, makes perfect sense to me. Go over to learninvestingnow.com. We have a course sitting there for you, and you can go ahead and begin that journey too, and we'll be right there with you. So with that being said, let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. Scott Fussell is, well, he's also a podcaster. Isn't that awesome? So here's the thing. You're going to be able to hear a lot of his information and a lot of his guests too, because I just have this special place for a lot of military people. And yes, you guys know, Army brat, but oh well. Get over it. It's all good. So he's the host of the Command Your Business podcast, where he helps military veterans who have become or want to become entrepreneurs. That in and of itself is enough for me. I mean, I know in a lot of our properties, we do our best to house as many veterans as we possibly can. But the thing that I've seen a lot of veterans need, or that transition from military life to civilian life, and Scott has managed to do so even after spending 4 years in the Army ROTC program at the University of Tennessee. And the key thing is he didn't just graduate; he's a distinguished military graduate. So keep that in mind as we talk to him today. And most importantly, today, when it comes to command your business, I love that. Command your business. It sounds like we're going to hear from a gentleman who's in control of his business as opposed to having the business control him. Do me a favor. Welcome, Mr. Scott Fussell.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Really excited to dig into our conversation today.
As am I, because I know if you're not focused on, how the volunteers are doing, you are definitely focused on how your business is doing today.
Absolutely. It's been a rough few years for my volunteers, but we're on the way back up. We got the right coach in place.
Yes. It's a rebuilding decade. Got it. Totally understood. Now, today, I tend to think of today's entrepreneurs are kind of like yesterday's superheroes. Now, obviously, in the service, you were definitely a real life superhero in that sense, but one of the things that every superhero has is an origin story. They start somewhere. And what I'd like to know is, before you were the entrepreneur, what what's in Scott's history? What motivates you to even start your podcast, start wanting to help veterans, begin to help? I think you have this term. Is it a veteranpreneur?
Yeah,
Well,
veteranpreneur.
Yeah, you got to help me out with that. So, where did all that come from?
Sure. So I grew up in Tennessee, just outside of Nashville, normal middle class upbringing. Went to college at the University of Tennessee, and I had always had an interest in all things military. So I enrolled in an Army ROTC class, fortunate enough to get a scholarship through that program. So I spent 4 years in the ROTC program there at the University of Tennessee. And once I graduated, I got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army, and then spent the next 4.5 years in the United States Army as a tank platoon leader, executive officer, several battalion maintenance officer, operations officer, several different roles in the Army. And I left in 1999. So I was very fortunate to have served pre 9/11. I served in a time of relative peace. So I was very fortunate. I have so much respect specifically for those people that have served post 9/11, that have raised their right hand, knowing what this country was facing and knowing what they were facing. So, I have the utmost respect for those veterans as well. So, I'm a very fortunate peacetime veteran, and but I learned so much in my time in the service. Got out, and then I started working in corporate America. So, I started working with Fortune 500 and global companies, and doing different roles. I've done things like Six Sigma Master Black Belt, which sounds like some kind of karate job, but it's actually very focused on process and data analysis. And I've been a plant manager, and I've been a marketing manager, and kind of all things in between. And I think my military service has really helped me be successful as a civilian in the corporate world. And then about a year ago, I've always dabbled in small ventures, online, whether it be small niche sites or just always been interested in entrepreneurship, and I've always had a passion for veterans. And I started listening to podcasts in 2013, and I got hooked on Pat Flynn. And I listened to basically consumed every episode that Pat Flynn had, which led me to John Lee Dumas, who I know you've had on your podcast from Entrepreneur on Fire. And I started listening to John and hearing his story, and hearing it. He was an Army veteran as well, seeing what he had done. So that kind of, led me to founding Command Your Business, with a focus on not just entrepreneurship, but focus on veteran entrepreneurship, or that veteranpreneur. And I can't say that I've claimed that phrase or I created that phrase, but I certainly use it. I think it's been coined, that veteran entrepreneur. And I think that's important for our veterans today to realize that, and I've heard it many times on your show, that you've got to take charge of your own destiny. That coming from someone who has been in corporate America, there is no security in corporate America, and there really is no security, and you've got to take matters into your own hands. So I'm built Command Your Business with the goal of helping veteran entrepreneurs and highlighting what other successful veteran entrepreneurs are doing. As if you follow what's going on in the news, as our country has pulled out of Iraq, as we have pulled out of Afghanistan, our military is now drawing down, and it's getting smaller, and there are going to be more and more veterans that are leaving active duty, and the amount of people that are coming out, the amount of great jobs are not being created in this economy. So that's kind of why I started Command Your Business, and really wanted to focus on and highlight those opportunities as an entrepreneur, which a lot of people, you're coming from a military family background, don't necessarily realize that those opportunities are out there.
Right. Well, for a significant period of time, they've been told, the same things, or been doing the same things, and now instead of, especially when it comes to being an entrepreneur, you're not reporting to your CO for duty. You're not staying up late at night. You don't have any KP duty. You ain't got to. There's nothing for you to do except for you now get to decide what to do, which is a completely new skill set.
Yeah, it is, and for many people, and if they look at it at a broad level, but one of the things that I've found as I've talked to military veterans who have been successful entrepreneurs, and I listen to other veterans as they try to build something and help really looking at the skill set they do have. Many people would be surprised that there are really some, quite a bit of entrepreneurs within the military. Some of the, most impressive entrepreneurs I've ever met are sergeants in the Army who, if not in a business sense, but if you look at the definition of an entrepreneur, and you have this unclear circumstances, these audacious goals, and contrary to popular belief, and a lot of times they're given very limited guidance and very limited resources, and they'll go and make that happen. So I want to highlight to people that they if they peel back what they've done, they have a lot of those skills. Certainly most specifically our combat veterans who have been put in just some
Right.
pretty unbelievable situations and have been able to manage and successfully get themselves and their soldiers out of those situations. So, I think that bodes very well for entrepreneurship. And to your point, people have told them that they can't be entrepreneurs, but if they really look at that skill set that they have and everything that they've learned, if they peel back and really match that to entrepreneurship, a lot of them are very, very, very well suited to becoming an entrepreneur.
And you bring up a very important point. I often think about how we grew up, what we used to do plays into the type of entrepreneur that we can become. If we're talking about, we'll take mothers as a random example. So, any mother that knows how to get their kids up out of bed to school on time, and then later get them to do their homework and then go to bed on time, probably is going to be a pretty good leader when it comes to taking a team of people and having them accomplish a mission at the same time. And we for whatever reason, we discount some of the things that we were either given or things that we've gone through. And I agree with you. In no place do I see it more than with military veterans. It's like there's so many transferable skills. In fact, let me ask you this question: what are some of the most major things that you were able to do, or that you were doing either in the military or that the military gave you, that allowed you to transfer your skills over to be able to create cash flow in your business and as an entrepreneur?
I think one of the things is just the ability to learn and to ability to learn on the fly. And
Yeah.
contrary to popular belief, it's certainly my experience as an Army officer. I went through my initial basic training, if you will. It's a little bit different for officers than enlisted, but I went through my basic training, and it's somewhat very gave me a limited skill set to get into my first job, and I had to grow into and learn. Once I got and became a tank platoon leader, in charge of 16 soldiers and 4 tanks, I had to really learn really how to lead that organization. And every role past that, there was no training for me. It was, hey, here's the job. You need to go figure it out. You need to talk to the right people. You need to really figure out what are the key and the core competencies that are critical for this role. So that, I think that's been one of the most important things for me, and being able to get in my first my corporate career, or since starting Command Your Business, is being able to figure it out. I when I started a podcast and I started listening to podcasts, and I'm sure you're the same way. I had no clue on how to, a feed. What's a feed? What's a
Right.
So for me, that probably is probably one of the biggest thing is being able to figure it out. I can I believe that I can figure out and learn anything if I put my mind to it. And I think our military uh, veterans and active duty and military spouses really have that same skill set.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that for a second. When it comes to the willingness to figure it out, I find that to be, as you say, a necessary skill set. I think it's mandatory for every entrepreneur, and the ones that don't just figure it out. How did you grow comfortable with the idea of not knowing what was going to happen next? Because that's usually the key. Is like I want to know. Many people say I want to know what happens next. Jay, I don't want to just write the offer and not know where the money's coming from. I don't want to just take that first step. But yet you're out there doing it. How did you manage to get that skill set?
I think some of it goes to some of the roles and the responsibilities that you're given at a very young age, and tasked to do, and then also the kind of the culture, that I found. People may say that the military is risk averse, but I would disagree with that. And I had a company commander that really talked to me, very early on about the difference between a risk and a gamble. So a risk is something that you can mitigate and find out, hey, what are all the potential outcomes? Manage that as best as you can versus an uneducated gamble where you're going to the craps table in Vegas and hoping that seven doesn't come up. So I think that was one of the key things is really understanding the difference between the two.
Yeah, well, I wish I would have had this conversation with you a few years ago because, see, I went to the craps table in Vegas and it was the fastest. I think it was like $90 that I've ever lost in my entire life. And I was like, okay, I'm done with that. So that was definitely a gamble that did not work in my favor. And I have not gone back since to figure out how to make that work in any way, shape, or form. But you don't want to risk when it comes, or sorry, you don't want to gamble when it comes to your business. You want to take somewhat calculated risk. I'm assuming that's a skill set when you're aiming artillery that you're trained to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that you can't without 100% know the outcome. You know that you can do everything in your power to learn as much as you can, but then when it's time to take action, you go and take action. They talk about crossing the line of departure. That's when you cross going on a mission. That's at the point where enemy contact happens. So you do all your planning up until that point. You mitigate as many risks up until that point. But once you cross that line of departure, a lot of that plan goes out the window. But you've already mitigated a lot of those risks. So I think that helps, and that just that culture I think really is kind of embedded in a lot of military veterans, and certainly our post 9/11 veterans that have served in Iraq and Afghanistan have had to really truly dial into this. You talk about life and death situations and being able to really mitigate and manage those risks. It's pretty unbelievable.
Agreed. But at the same time, one of the things that you gain, or that I believe, you gain, is you gain practice at doing something that I believe entrepreneurs do every day. Every day you're out there trying to build your business and grow your cash flow. You've got decisions to make, and decisions that affect many things, quote unquote, down the line. If you're a landlord, every decision you make affects someone's house to some way or degree. And as a business owner, every decision you make affects the customer experience of your product or service. So I think you guys have a very strong advantage in the fact that you've made life or death decisions, and these decisions are not quite life or death.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I've talked to I've been to several military entrepreneur events, and you talk to the guys and gals that have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. They talk about, hey, this compared to having people shoot at me, this is this is all. Even a bad day as an entrepreneur is still a better day than having someone shoot at you.
So then talk to me about this. What from your perspective, why is it so scary to be an entrepreneur for so many people? Because we're not being shot at, but why is it so scary? You've faced the idea and the concept, and you put your physical body into harm's way. You're Why is this so scary to so many people, in your opinion?
I think it is. Some of it's that fear of the unknown. Again, you don't know the positive outcome. I put in X cash into this investment, and I know I'm going to automatically get Y back. I'm going to get a rate of return of 8% guaranteed. Feeling like, hey, there's this perception that the corporate job or whatever job they might have is there is no risk. That, hey, the paycheck comes every 2 weeks. Hey, this is great. This is going to go on forever. And bam, I've seen it several times in my corporate career, changing the economy, changing the business. And I think that perception that being in working for someone else is not risky, I think is what holds a lot of people back. They feel like they're risking everything and they could lose everything at the drop of a hat. But if you mitigate a lot of those risks, I think that's the key is mitigating as many as you have. But then at some point you make you make that move. You don't make a gamble, but you make that calculated risk, and you work on getting the return. And if something happens along the way, which it inevitably will,
You got that right.
yeah, you pivot. Yeah, I mean, you figure out, you can either throw your hands up and surrender, or you can turn to your right or left and make that pivot and figure out what you need to do next. And I think that's again something that veterans are especially good at, is we talked about earlier. Once you cross that line of departure, the kind of the plan goes out the window. So you kind of react and go for everything that you've been trained to and that you believe, and you can kind of pivot from that. So I think that's something that is really a key.
Yeah, and the cool thing is to understand that. But when you go in with that mindset up front, I think it gives you a very strong business advantage, because I can count on many hands, because that's how many it would take, the number of entrepreneurs where we think, I've thought this, where everything's always going to be perfect and it's going to go up, and then we're somehow shocked. Oh my God, it didn't go just like I planned. Because we crossed, as you would say, the line of departure. After that, it doesn't matter. The bell has rung. The game is afoot, as you would say, and you've got to be able to respond appropriately. And I think your again, your military background gives you that super advantage to keep your emotions in check, so that when something happens, not if, when something happens, you are now faced with the ability to be calm enough to decide what to do next. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious with your business, where have you had to pivot, and what were some of those situations in which you were like, I can't believe this is happening, but you figured it out anyway? You knew that was coming. You knew I was going to stop it and give you a quick update. Anyway, for those of you who have already purchased the book, you know that that's there. That's great. I've got a special thing that I want to tell you about here in just a second. But those of you who are looking for the audiobook, it's coming. I'm still working on it. I haven't forgotten about you. Just letting you know, keeping you in the loop. For those of you who want to know when the audiobook's coming out and or get on the update list, send a text message with the code audio. So you're going to send the word audio, AUDIO, to 949-682-3565, 949-682-3565. Those of you listening the first time, you're like, what book, what audio? I don't know what you're talking about, Jay. Totally understood. Recently put together a book which details the 10 steps that are necessary in order to go out there to create cash flow, specifically using real estate, specifically using all the tips, techniques, and things that I know, and that could fit in one book. So that book is currently available. Many of you have already taken advantage of that, and that's awesome. So for those of you who have purchased, directly from the website over at cashflowdiary.com/book, or you sent in a text message to purchase at book is the keyword there, and that's 949-682-3565. You are going to be receiving in your email a special invitation to what we're calling a VIP lead generation day. So what we're going to do is I'm going to invest 4 hours live with everyone who is a current customer of any CashFlow Diary product, And instead of paying the normal 197, you're going to get in at absolutely no cost. And what I'm going to do for 4 hours is go through every lead generation technique that I know, and you're going to get it. You can ask questions. It's going to be fun. I'm going to do my best to make sure that you guys get immense value and make sure that you leave fired up with all the information that you need. So, again, some things to understand is that when it comes to lead generation, it's one of those topics that not many people are willing to address. But one thing I will say, keep this in mind. You know the story in terms of how we got started, so that this is not going to be that, oh, here's how you write that, ad and place media out there, because we didn't have the budget for that. Everything I know how to do is low to no cost in terms of marketing and strategies, etc. So if you are open to low and no cost, and you're currently a Cashflow Diary customer of some kind, you're going to get that at absolutely no cost. Or you could take this as a hint. You might want to go and actually get a Cashflow Diary product real fast, like the book or one of our courses. It doesn't really matter to me. What matters is that I give you guys an additional opportunity to be able to, build your business, build your cash flow. And I know one of the most important things that was, at least for me, was learning how to generate leads. And I'm going to invest enough time to make sure that you have the ability to generate more leads than you have the time to even handle or get back with. So that when you cross your line of departure, you know where you're going, you know that you have something to look forward to, and you'll be able to, quote unquote, build that business, take down the enemy, whatever analogy you need to get excited. That's what we're going to do to make sure that you have enough leads. Anyway, enough of that. Let me get you back to the interview.
First I want to kind of go back to what you're talking about. Just when things inevitably are going to happen. You go back specifically in your business and in real estate. You look at 2008, and no one saw that
Yes.
coming.
Let's look at that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No one saw that coming. And I heard one of your earlier interviewees talking about kind of having that long-term view, and you look at investing, and you think about like Warren Buffett. 2008 was a huge opportunity for him. He's always said, hey, when everyone is selling, that's when you need to be buying. And really, he has that long-term view. He understands that change is going to happen for the bad and eventually for the good as well. If I would have had a ton of capital in '08 and the knowledge of what's to come, you could have done very well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, and it's not just always about having the resources, though, because to use the military as an easy example, is you could have access to the tanks, the artillery, the range control, everything that you need, but just because you have access to those things doesn't mean you know how to use them.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. They kind of call those force multipliers. So you don't necessarily have to own the assets, but you've got the something there that can kind of multiply what you're able to do. So it's a great point that I didn't even need the capital. It's probably more the knowledge than anything on what was possible.
Well, and that's probably the crux of everything for me here, is the fact that most of the time we let ourselves stop taking the first step because we don't think we can complete the last step. Well, if we go as far as we can see, when we get there, we'll see further, because in theory, once you cross the line of departure, there's no coming back until they call retreat, right?
Yeah, I mean, until the mission's over, that's you go until the mission is completed, and that's
you mean you can't say, hey, there was a detour sign and I didn't know what to do, so I came back home. That doesn't work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. Typically I was on tanks, and you'd have a mine plow tank, so it didn't matter if there was concertina wire, minefields. And again, this was all in training for me, so I don't want anyone to think that I've served in combat in Iraq or Afghanistan. But in training, and certainly those people that have served since then, hey, you plow right through the minefield. You overcome those obstacles one way or another, and you figure it out again.
And again, and as many times as it takes until the mission is done. And there could be a number of people listening like, why are they keep talking about the military? And I'm just like, there's so many parallels in the skill sets that are required, and I'm just hoping that they're picking up on the gems that you're dropping so that they can hear it. Now, one thing you mentioned briefly when you were talking about learning to lead was the culture that was required, or that is centered around your 16 men and your 4 tanks, etc. How important have you found culture to be during this transitioning from military service over to business ownership?
I've found it incredibly important. Surrounding yourself, with people that have the same beliefs as you do. Um, I was at a military entrepreneur event recently in New York City called TechStars Patriot Boot Camp, which is put on by the TechStars team, which is a technology incubator for startups. And they talk about how important culture is, and how important that leadership is. And as a entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're the one that sets it. You set the pace. I had someone had said a quote while I was there. So you set the pace, you set the culture, and you set the standard. And that's something that being a leader, being an entrepreneur or a business owner, it all falls on you, and people are going to look to what you're doing as what the right thing to do is. If you're doing the right things and leading the right way, you're going to be able to start building that culture. But it all starts at the top. How if you say one thing and do something else, the people are going to see it, and it's going to eventually happen. They're going to do the wrong things because you've been doing the wrong things.
Right. Yeah. In fact, they'll do it 10 times worse, or more, depending on if you want them to stop doing something bad. You do it a little bit, they'll do it 10 times better than you. If you want them to do something good, they'll do it 10 times worse than you until you train them.
Yeah, absolutely. That training is important. I talked about I had my initial training as an Army officer, but then once you get to your unit, I mean, you're always doing not formal training, but you're always training in small units, and training for and preparing for those contingency plans, and how do you react to an ambush, or how do you react to contact, or how do you set up a defensive position. So again, it may not be that formal training, but you're always planning for all of those kind of what if scenarios, so that when it does happen, it just becomes muscle memory and you just react.
Muscle memory. I like that. Imagine having the muscle memory necessary to, pivot your business and put yourself in the correct, position so that you can capitalize on any market opportunities. And that can only come from practice, and most importantly, learning to keep your emotions in check. I love it a lot. Now, for many individuals who are transitioning out of the service, or just in life in general, whether they're coming out of college or high school, maybe they're transitioning through jobs and they're looking to do something different. They're learning many new skills. The primary one, I think, is that they're coming from being a job taker and they're learning to become a job maker, learning to create that very same culture and environment and all those things that they've been used to. What have you found to be one of the more difficult things, specifically for veterans or for your business, in terms of helping them to become that job maker?
I think one of the things is that, again, we touched on this a little bit earlier, is they have that. Some of the veterans coming out have that perception that they are only what they did in the military.
Right.
So one of the examples that I hear a lot, and people talk about a lot, is that if you're an infantryman in the Army, basically you carry a rifle and you go and attack the enemy. And there's not a lot of they see a guy that can go and blow things up and carry a rifle. There's not a huge market for that in the civilian workplace.
Well, no, you're right.
So they get put into, if people don't understand the skill sets they have, they get put into, well, hey, you were in the infantry, well, great, I've got this great security job for you. Or, hey, you can go be a security job or a security guard at our company. Or, okay, yeah, you can probably go and be a police officer. Not that there's anything I have many police officers that I know, but not to put anything down towards police officers. But they're shoehorned into this uh, you know, job role, but they have so many more skills than that. We talked about earlier, all of those leadership skills, those skills that can translate very well to be an entrepreneur. And if they don't make that connection and they don't know how to sell themselves, I know you've talked about that before. They don't have the skills or the ability to sell themselves, that they're really going to struggle. But if they're able to kind of get out of that box that people have painted them in, and really say, I have so much more skills than just being an infantryman, the sky's the limit. And I've been to, again, several military entrepreneur events, and some of the companies that these veterans are building are pretty mind blowing. And they've been able to get out of, hey, this was my role in the past, but that's not who I am going to be in the future. One of the veterans that I interviewed on my podcast talked about, he was certainly proud to be a veteran, but he wanted to be known as a successful entrepreneur who, by the way, is a veteran. Not, okay, this is a veteran who also started a business, but hey, he wanted to be, his next phase of his life was an entrepreneur who, by the way, had served and is a veteran.
Totally understood. And learning to become this new identity, if you will. I mean, like you said, there was an identity for a period of time, and that's who you were. That's how you talked. That's how you walked. You did the things that person did, and now you're learning this new thing. Here's a question for those of us that are out there building our businesses and growing, our customer base and maybe even expanding our teams. What would you say are some of the best benefits to working with or hiring or trying to uh, get more veterans involved in this whole entrepreneur revolution, we'll call it?
I think one of the things is, if you talk about bringing them onto your team, is that, and something that's helped me immensely, they may not know a thing about your business, but they know about getting things done, getting goals accomplished, and making things happen. And you can tell them what needs to be done and give them some resources to figure it out, and they're going to amaze you with what they can do. And that's something that that I found is some business owners have said they've hired some people maybe that have come out of college that maybe have um, a very prestigious degree, and then they've hired some other people that were veterans for a similar role, even though the people with the degree you would think would be much more successful. They really had to be managed. They didn't take the initiative to go and figure things out like the veterans did. The veterans would just run with it. Hey, I have no clue on how to do this. He would give them a very small task, and they are a very large task, and they might not even know what the task is, but they say, Roger, I got it. I'm going to go make it happen. And then they will go and figure out how to get it done. In many cases before some time, who's been trained and educated and should know how to do it.
I love that. That is so awesome because at the end of the day, it what really matters most is knowing how to utilize what you do have and not being focused on what you don't have, and taking whatever you do have and making the best with it to accomplish the goal. And there's always the ability to go get help or figure things out. And I love what you said about taking initiative. Not enough entrepreneurs take initiative, or would-be entrepreneurs take initiative in so many different ways. Is that, I mean, is that like a course in boot camp, take initiative?
I think that's something that they absolutely instill in you in the training, is that, hey, you've got to take initiative and don't react to the enemy, but make the enemy react to you. So you got to take the initiative and take the fight to the enemy and make them react to you, and put them on their heels, versus you always being in the defense and just reacting to what someone else is doing to you. And similar to to my journey, being in corporate America, and then taking that initiative. I talked about getting hooked on podcasts and just consuming everything. But then at some point, I just said to myself, I can sit here and try to uh, train and learn all day long. But at the end of the day, if I don't do some kind of action and take some kind of initiative, I'm just going to be sitting here listening to podcasts 5 years from now and thinking about all these great ideas and not doing anything. And that's again, I think veterans specifically, and it's not just veterans, but they definitely have that trait of eventually they just take initiative, take the action, knowing that along the way they're not going to have all the answers, but they know that they're going to be able to figure out the answers.
Well, the probably the most important thing for everybody to hear out of that is that there's got to come a point where you've learned all you can learn by just sitting, and it has to have some sort of experience with the information that you've taken in order to make it yours, in order to have a way to get to what I call the feedback loop, and all feedback is good. Some feedback tells, because all it does is it tells you more what you should do more of or what you should do less of, and all feedback is good. And we delay too long into getting into that feedback loop. But what I hear you saying is there's no fear of the feedback loop in this case.
Yeah, and I think in entrepreneurs in general, and specifically, you start talking about I've at TechStars at the Patriot Boot Camp, it's very technology focused. So they're very much focused on things like in the lean startup from the book by Eric Ries, and one of the things that's key to that book, and I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of this book before, if not read it themselves, is that you just got to get a minimal viable product out there, and then you iterate from there. And to your point, that feedback is either going to be good or bad. So if it's bad, you're going to know, okay, well, that's not what I need. Or if it's somewhat positively received, then you can build on that. But you've got to get something basic out there, build upon it, and continue to grow and learn. Because that, again, that, yeah, to your point, that feedback loop. If you're afraid of the feedback, you're going to fail. The feedback is what is going to make you successful.
Indeed. As I've said before, and I say again, fail forward, fail frequently, and fail fast. That's the best way to get it done and get it over with. As we get close to the end here today, I'm curious, what would you say to that person who's getting started for the first time? They're looking at, they want to put on their superhero tights and become this entrepreneur now. They're ready to take on the world. What would you say is the most important skill set that they could go out there, begin to develop to make this happen for them?
I think one of the things, we've touched on, just the ability and trying and working on learning new things, and I guess it would be a skill set, but it would be just talking to people and connecting with people in your network, and that's something that that I talk about with veterans and on my podcast, is that regardless of whatever it is you're doing, you may not realize this, but you have an incredible network out there, and you've got to be willing to open up and be willing to help other people. You can't do it selfishly, but just be willing to talk to people, find out what they are doing, what ideas, what businesses they're doing, and open up and listen and being able to connect with people, because that's honestly, and that's what I tell other veteran entrepreneurs, is you have an amazing network out there if you just kind of expand your horizon a little bit, and be willing to meet new people, go out and seek out new people and just have a conversation with them. Specifically, as I talk to veterans, you would be amazed at how many other veteran entrepreneurs and senior business leaders out there would be willing to talk to you and give you advice and give you feedback. And that's something that's been tremendously helpful for me, is just really reaching out and talking to other people, and not being afraid for them to say no is not the right time, or I don't have time. Okay, got it. I'll go and talk to someone else. But been immensely important to what I'm doing with Command Your Business is being willing to just connect with people and be genuine about it. Be willing to help, find ways that you can help them and help connect them to other people. But the one thing that I would say is, yeah, open yourself up. Don't be afraid, and just connect with people. It can be online. You can first connect with them, on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, but then be willing to take it a step further. Either A, if they're in your area, go and meet in person. B, get on the phone, get on a Skype call, get on a Google Hangout. You'll be amazed at what kind of doors that will open, what kind of ideas you might get from that if you just kind of open your eyes and open yourself and be willing to be vulnerable.
Yep, indeed. Speaking of connection, tell us a little bit how we can find out more about what you're up to.
Absolutely. You can check out everything that I'm working on at commandyourbusiness.com. You can find the podcast on iTunes as well as Stitcher Radio. I would love to connect with anyone, so feel free to email me, Scott at Command Your Business. If you're a veteran out there listening and have any questions, or if you think that I might be able to help you or kind of connect you to someone I know, I would be more than willing and happy to help.
Excellent. Well, we definitely appreciate you taking your time out of your day today to share with us. Hopefully, your investment will produce an excellent return.
Absolutely, Jay. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know what it's time to do. It's time to connect, right? He said go to commandyourbusiness.com. Feel free to go to the podcast, get more information, and most importantly, go hug a vet today, because that'll help you. It'll help you feel better and understand that there are real people out there who are protecting the freedoms that all of us get the privilege of enjoying and using and exercising when we go out there to create business and make more jobs. I'm glad that you were here today. I'm glad that you chose to listen. And as usual, I will talk to you guys again soon. Until next time.
Thank you for investing your time with Jay Massey and the Cash Flow Diary. When you have a moment, please visit iTunes and leave a positive comment about the show. And go now to our website, CashFlowDiary.com, to take advantage of our free business building course, Cash Flow Foundation. Gain the knowledge, understanding, and skill that will teach you how to never need a job again. Until next time.